Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Morning, Dan. Oh, quick. He was quick on the draw on that one. Hey, happy first Muse Day of December. How about that?
Is it? I think you're right. It is.
It is.
Wow.
It is the first Muse Day of December.
Is it December?
I know, right? I feel like we should get a present because it has just been a weird whirlwind. And I don't know what happened. Like, I feel like Halloween was just last week. Like, honestly, right. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But happy Muse Day.
Happy Muse Day to you as well. And you had a very busy week. So you in particular feel that whirlwind sort of feeling. So
yeah, it was the strangest. Our right after Thanksgiving, it was kind of clear that our dog wasn't doing very well. And so we kind of wanted to just kind of wait and see. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but so then Monday of last week, we had a final appointment with our vet and knew that the loving thing would be to say bye to Finn. Sweet little Finn, who's been on the show a few times.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
So that was last Monday. And then, of course, prepping for the sermon. And then I had a birthday in there too. And so I'm aging before our very eyes. And so it was like this up and down situation.
You had a birthday, like it was your birthday.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I knew that you had told me that I had a birthday this week, and I assumed it was one of your kids. You had responsibility to do a birthday. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was your birthday. Well, happy birthday.
Was mine. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was Wednesday, ? The 29th. Yes, Wednesday. Yeah. Okay. Well, honestly, I didn't eat, my daughter came in, I want to say just after midnight for some reaon on Tuesday night. And she was like, do you know what today is? And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I literally had to look at the phone and go, oh, yeah. So
kids are more excited about those things than adults. So
yeah. Well, yeah. And it just was, it was an inopportune time, quite frankly, to have a birthday. I just was not,
this does not fit with my schedule.
Yeah.
This does not fit with my schedule.
Busy. I got things going on. I'm emotionally wrecked. I don't have time for a birthday.
That's right.
Kind of the way that went. Hey, you guys, in case you're new here, this is the MuseCast, and he's Dan Kent, and I'm Shawna Boren. And every week we come together and we chat and laugh, and we just discuss some things, in particular things regarding the sermon from the previous Sunday, and we respond to questions and comments, and then we chat with you guys later on. It's just a fun old time, and we love it. And so for those of you who don't know, Tuesday is no longer Tuesday in the world. It is Muse Day.
Day, that's right.
Now you know. Now you're in the know.
Right.
All right, Dan, it is December. There is fresh snow on the ground.
There is. Yeah.
Air's getting drier. You're prepping for your sermon that's coming up fast and quick and soon. But I know you're dreaming of beaches and palm trees and more humidity. So
the humidity is the key.
Yeah, that's what you need is the humidity. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough. I've had a hard time. I've had usually I'm a really great sleeper. I love sleeping and we've talked about this, how you and I both, we go to bed early and we get up early. But the last couple of days I've had sleep problems, which I hardly ever have. And as of right now, I feel like I can barely, hold it together because my eyes are dry and my whatever. So putting on a good fight and
yeah, you are.
But I do love the snow. I mean, it's very pretty. And we get the yogurt covered pretzels on all the trees. So
very nice. Yeah, I love this snow. That fresh fallen looks like powder. It's so pretty. when it's been around for several weeks and, you know, people have plowed trash into it and it's dirty,
Right.
like, then I'm like, oh, that's gross. But this
Gross.
is very beautiful.
This is very pretty.
Yeah. I just need the sun to shine a little bit more. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. So, believe it or not, we are already in week 2 of our 5-week sermon series. And God is the Gift is the series. And again, I just want to say to people, which this has been the biggest surprise to me. People are like, wait a second. Wait, I thought we were doing Revelation. Like, well, we are, but there is this little thing called Christmas. And every year we kind of dedicate a few weeks to that. So if you don't mind, we're going to do that for a little bit and then we'll go back to Revelation.
That's
so
right.
funny. Oh my goodness.
Yep. Yeah, apparently some people don't care about Christmas. You know, they just all they care about is the book of Revelation. So
that's right.
You know, hey, I for one am excited about this series, and we are now into week 2. And this week, not only did you have like this really crazy whirlwind week where you had birthdays and, you know, family crises to take care of, but you also put together a banger sermon. So that's just, you know, just capped it off with that. So you definitely deserve some kudos and a day off is what I would propose. So but yeah. So you got to jump in starting sort of the more gifty type attributes of God. And the series basically is taking Exodus 34, 6 and 7, which is this classic, almost like statement of faith in the Old Testament for the Israelites that just kind of describes God as, you know, gracious and merciful and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquities, transgression, and sin. And yet he still holds people accountable. And this kind of revelation of God to Moses was sort of like this icon, almost this kind of hope that Israel held over the next 1,000 years, hoping that God was really like this. Is God really the way that he promised Moses that he was? And that vision of God, and we talk here about how our picture of God is so important. This was their picture of God, and they hoped that God was really like this. And so this Christmas series is basically shares the good news that Jesus really is the fulfillment of this God who was promised to Israel, and it kind of explores some of those attributes and why those attributes are such a great gift. And last week Greg had talked about God's justice and the fact that ultimate reality is just, and this week you get to talk about God's forgiveness, and so and you did a great job of kind of showing how you know, forgiveness, when God forgives, it's sort of like lifting us. It's sort of like this release from this burden that we have, this burden of our guilt, this burden of our woe and all of that. And but it's more than just this episodic sort of thing. It's not just like this, you did something wrong, now I'm forgiving you. It's really more of a kind of a chronic sort of ongoing posture that God has towards us. The word used as forgiveness is based on the same word where people kind of talk about people who are slow to anger or long of nose. And the idea there is that when people get angry, the blood flows to their face and their nose gets hot. And so the idea, and this is sort of a funny way of looking at it, if a person had a long nose, it would take them longer to get angry. And so in sort of a comical, sort of fun way of describing God, God has a long nose. He doesn't get angry very quick. And so there's this cushion, this sense of like, you don't have to worry about making mistakes all the time. You don't have to worry about you know, failing. God will not, like, he's not standing there with his hand held back waiting to slap you. And but then there is also the episodic stuff too. There are the things that we do that need to be forgiven. And so you talked about how this forgiveness is very robust, and it applies to the fact that we need to be forgiven, and we are all sinners, and we all need to be reconciled with God ultimately, and part of that is to be forgiven for missing the mark. But and the other part of that too is that the fact that God is forgiving, it allows us to just share anything with God, and we can be straight or honest, or we can just be ourselves with God. We don't have to pretend to be something that we're not. The second part of that is in the same way that God is forgiving towards us, we are also expected to forgive others. And this, is not a simple thing. This is, you kind of just dipped your toe in that and just kind of shared the ideal. But it's complex, and there's a lot of things that are not forgiveness, and people worry about, like, if I forgive somebody for hurting me, does that mean I have to be their friend, or does that mean I have to reconcile with them? And you kind of talked about some of those things that no, that's not what it means. And then you shared some of the kind of practical benefits of forgiving others, and just how it's good for your health, and how it's good for your mind and your attention and all of that kind of stuff. And then finally, you talked about what I think might be the hardest thing for many people, and that is forgiving yourself. Some people tend to be a lot harder on themselves than anybody else is, and I think that reminder that we need to be forgiving of ourselves, I think, is an important reminder, and I think it's one that can be liberating for a lot of people. And basically, what that means is that we can free ourselves from our habit of condemning ourselves, and I think that that's just really, really important. And so, it's really great timing for this sermon. And this part of the reason why I like this series is that so many of these things, a lot of the unforgiveness that we have, and a lot of the bitterness and anger that we have, what I've seen, it tends to revolve around our families. And so this is a really great time for you to share this message going into the holiday season, when a lot of people, they might be with family members that they haven't forgiven, or that they hold grudges or bitterness toward. And so this could be a really good, or here's another thing too, they might be around family members who are very condemning of them, or who are very judgmental of them. And this is a good reminder to you don't have to be like that to yourself, and you can be forgiving and merciful to yourself. And so I think it was a great sermon. And how did you feel like it went? Did you feel like it, landed the way that you wanted it to?
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for your summary. It's always interesting when you're the one who's given the sermon to hear that reflection back. And so it's like, yep, that's what I meant. Yep. So good job.
A lot of pressure, by the way.
I know. I'm sure it is. I do feel good about the end result. We've talked about the insanity of the week for me, but that happens to a lot of us. Nothing is ever just perfect leading up to something like this. But I feel like God and I had to wrestle a little bit with a few things, because in all honesty, the forgiveness of self part, I felt like I was supposed to have that be a part of the gift, and I thought, this is probably just me. No one else needs to hear this. And it was just one of those things that I was not allowed to let go of. So I was like, all right, fine. So, and of course, there are so many things when you're talking about forgiveness and practically the way that plays out and just the psychology of it all. That literally is a series in and of itself. And so you have to cut things, and you have to try to hone in and focus on things. And like you said, you can only just dip your toe in because you want to make sure you're getting the full picture of it all. I will say, the more that I am in these passages in Exodus, the more I am like, yes, go us for doing this as a Christmas series, because I think it's a great way to get at who Jesus is, why he came, and how that impacts us all, by reflecting back on this character that God stated about himself, but somehow always got lost, in the mix. So I'm just really thankful that we're doing it. But yeah, I felt good. I will say Saturday night in the run through, I think I told you guys, I kind of felt disembodied from it. Like I just, I think my emotions and everything, I was just tired. And so it was more just kind of clinical, like just going through the points and making sure the content was there. And then Sunday, of course, when you're in front of people and you're getting their responses and stuff, it helps. And the only other thing I feel like God and I had to wrestle about was including the story of Finn, because I'm like, are you kidding me with this? Like, you can't give me any other example to talk about long of nose, slow to anger. Like, come on, this is like fresh and raw. But even, you know, in the beyond, sweet little Finny is with us and teaching us lessons and helping us out. So it was, that was kind of fun, but I was a little like, oh, come on.
Well, and I know that like, you know, I'm sure that Mary and myself and Paul were just like, is she really going to do that? They're like, when you started mentioning Finn, we're like, really? You're going to do that? And you held it together very well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Well,
you know, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, like, I know you come from the therapy world, and I'm sure you know a ton about the psychology behind forgiveness and all, but I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole, man, of just, and that organization that I found, the Forgiveness Project, that was super powerful. What I didn't get into was the fact that this organization, which was founded by a journalist, they travel the world and they provide resources to help people like who have been victimized, and also perpetrators, and not only in individual situations, but like victims of like national things. And so they have Desmond Tutu was a part of their board, and they've helped people who have come out of, you know, like horrific like a genocide situation or whatever. They've helped people like deal with forgiveness toward their nation, their government. I mean, it is big and massive and huge. And some of those stories were just so powerful and just beyond my scope of like understanding and comprehending what that would be like. And so it was just super, super fascinating. And the same with the Institute of Forgiveness, just like, I'm like, we have a whole like institute for this stuff and the work that they're doing. So all that to say, I think this is like a pretty big deal that we all deal with in one way or another.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And, you know, I even in the when you look at the research on forgiveness, it's interesting. Like there is no consensus on how do you forgive, and it really is something that we each have to. We have the expectation to forgive. We have the promise that this is good. We have hopefully we have the experience of how liberating forgiveness can be, whether it's forgiving ourselves or others or whatever. But like there's not a consensus on how to do it, and I think that's because forgiveness, you're tapping into something that is much deeper and bigger and cosmic than just like any other psychological thing. It's more than just psychology. I think I'm just pulling this out of the air right now, so maybe this is nonsense, but
no, I love it.
I wonder if that's part of the reason why it's so hard to articulate, because we're tapping into our unity. We're tapping into the part of us where when Jesus says to his disciples, I pray that my disciples will be one in the same way that you, Father, and I are one. In other words, when he's saying that I want them to have the same oneness that God has, well, that doesn't happen if we're walking around in unforgiveness. And so forgiveness is sort of the early steps toward reconciling, which is the early step towards unifying, and anything that gets us on that path toward unity. I think you're dealing with something that is more than just psychological. It definitely is psychological, and there's all sorts of psychological stuff there, but there's something more to that also. And
absolutely,
absolutely,
and that's one of the things I love about our church is we don't shy away from the wholeness of our personhood, right? Like we are engaging our minds and our bodies and our hearts and our souls. And we recognize that things like this, that the teachings that we bring forth aren't just for our mind to get more knowledge, and they're not just for our bodies to be healthier, but also for our, of course, we're a church, for our souls to be enriched and reconciled to the Lord. And so I just think that's really cool. One of the things that I felt led to do through the sermon was talk a bit about, like you mentioned in the summary, about what forgiveness is not. And I think every time you and I are on the show and or in conversation, and we've talked about different issues, and the issue of reconciliation or non-judgment, forgiveness comes up, I feel like we always have to go through all these caveats of like, we're not saying this, we don't mean this, because those are the things that pop up for people. Yeah. And so I guess my question for you right now is why do you think we have to like overcome those hurdles in order to get at the root of what Jesus is actually calling us to do? Because he set that example for us and literally said on the cross, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And so likewise, we are to be forgiving people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good question. Like, why do we have to keep, why do people just assume that it's something other than, what we're talking about? I think that part of the reason why people I think it's related to why people have a hard time forgiving themselves. I think that people have really high expectations for themselves, and God has high expectations for them. And so God, he's calling us to high places, and he's calling us to be Christ-like. And so what does that look like? And we get this picture of ultimate unity and togetherness. And there is this sense in which I think that's really good that we have that, like, this is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there. But I think that there can be an impatience with getting to that point where, well, if that's where we're going, we have to get there now. And there's this sense in which this person who hurt me, I need to enact that future state now with this person. And I don't think that that's the case. And so I think that, look at how patient God is. Look at how long of nose God is. Look at how long he has delayed his return and all of that. I mean, God is very, very patient. And yeah, the ideal where God is going is going to happen, but that could be a long ways away from now. For now, I don't think we're expected to manifest the heavenly utopia here. I mean, I think right now we're expected to forgive, and that doesn't mean that we have to reconcile yet. That's the ultimate goal. That doesn't mean that we have to even be with the people that we're forgiving. Definitely I think God wants us to protect ourselves and all of that. So I think that's a big part of it. I did a sermon I don't know, a year and a half ago, where I talked about people's utopian visions and their dystopian visions. And I hypothesized that everyone has like a future that they are drawn to, and they have this picture of this future that they're drawn to. And everyone has likewise a dystopian future that they're afraid of. And it's interesting because you'll notice, like, people who tend to be more conservative and people who tend to be more progressive, they tend to have different dystopian futures, different things that they're afraid of. And you can see this like in TV shows and movies. What's the one, well, like for definitely the more conservative people, their dystopian future is like Armageddon, kind of like what is it? Mad Max. There's no law, there's no order, there's just chaos. But then,
and for progressives and liberals, it's Handmaid's Tale, right? The
Handmaid's Tale, exactly. That's the one I was trying to think of. Where it's like all order and structure, and we all walk around with these kind of dystopian and utopian futures, and so if your utopian future is based on the scriptures, and there's this idea that we're going to be together, and there is this inherent guilt and pressure to enact that now. And so I think part of what you and I do, and this is a long-winded answer, I apologize, but I think part of what we're doing is we're tapping the brakes on some of those things, and we're just saying right now we need to forgive. We don't have to we're not responsible for bringing heaven. We're responsible for forgiving.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think my thought process is like, man, forgiveness unfortunately can be such a trigger word, and it shouldn't be, because it truly is a gift. It's a gift that we receive. It's a gift that we can give, that we can bestow to others, but it is also a gift that we give to ourselves. And with the gift, like most gifts come with some sort of instruction manual, right? And so although we don't have a recipe for how to forgive and how it plays out, what we do know is that it does not mean, like we've said, everything's hunky-dory, the kingdom has come, we're all in perfect relation with one another. That's just not the case, nor is that always possible. And so I really did love that quote about the boundaries, loving yourself and loving the person simultaneously at a good distance. I just think that's really important.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a great quote. So where did you get that from?
That was, I think that was in a book I was reading, and they had quoted, it's a person by the name of Prentice something. I'll have to look it up. I'll have to find
that was good.
Yeah. We did get a question in.
Cool.
If we want to take a peek at that, let me pull that up. Thank you for engaging with the sermon and the show by sending in this question. This person said that they struggle with volatile anger with others and also getting stuck in depression/anger with themselves after anger outbursts or other moral shortcomings. Can you talk about tools to help break this vicious cycle? That's a good one. And I think that's something that you're not alone in. You who sent this in, but we're going to give Dan Ken a crack at this first.
Yeah. Well, first of all, people who struggle with anger issues really tick me off.
Yeah. I get so freaking mad at him.
Yeah. I think, well, I don't know. I mean, here's what I would say about that is whoever wrote this in, I think there's going to be a very nuanced personal reasons for that. And I've worked with people who have head injuries, and there's literally just a biological issue that they have to struggle with, where they have this explosive anger. And so there's no like conceptual thing that can really help them as much as they just need to be aware that they have this physical issue. I guess like, the explosive, what I've noticed is that people tend to be most explosive when they feel a sense of threat, like something is threatening them, and they feel like they're in danger. They don't feel safe. They don't feel secure in themselves. And you can see that, like in the classic road rage kind of thing is when somebody has a road rage incident, it's usually because they feel like someone has treated them with no dignity, and that is very alarming to them, or it's very like dangerous to them, because they're important. And so I think for me, just like trying to get in touch and be aware with what is going on in my head underneath the surface when I have these rage moments. Like what is it that I'm worried about? What's my big concern here? And if it's, I think what I have found is that most of the time when I've either looked at my own rage moments, or if I've talked to somebody else who has had these rage moments, usually it comes down to something about myself, something where I don't feel secure in and of myself. And so that's the first thing, is to always be seeking or pursuing this fulfillment of the self, or this fullness of the self in God's love, where these people can do whatever, and I am loved with an unsurpassable love. And the more I can live in that and really sort of believe that and really kind of embrace that, the less the things out here can trigger that level of rage. I guess that would be one thing. The other thing too is rage is it can be a physical habit. I mean, it really can just be, you don't think about it, it just happens. And because it's so physical, and because it's so habitual, I think that you have to learn new habits to just replace the old ones. And that's where things like breathing exercises, meditation, where you just get in the habit of calmness. You just get in the habit of what's social psychologists call frustration tolerance, where how much frustration can I endure before I react? And some people have a very low frustration tolerance, like Homer Simpson. And some people have a really high frustration tolerance, like Jesus. And so the goal is to be able to endure as much frustration as you can without reacting. And I think that's a good exercise. It's almost like weightlifting, but for your psyche. How much frustration can I tolerate before I react? You're training yourself to not be explosive. You're training yourself to be calm, and I think that that's a good thing. Those are some of the things I would say.
That's good, Dan.
I
think the only thing I would add is, again, none of us are alike, and in that we have different backstories and reasons for the way that we act and how we behave in the world. And so my hope is that this person has people in their life that they can be in process with this stuff about. We are big proponents of, if you need counseling and or therapy to get that there is nothing wrong with that. That does not discount the work of the Holy Spirit in your life. I think they can partner very well together. I think that's important. But one of the things as I was studying, and like I said, going down this rabbit hole, like in like the Institute of Forgiveness stuff, and even the Forgiveness Project, was they talked about, and these are, trained folks, and they talk about the need to practice situations before you get into them. Yeah. And really quickly, I just want to say, I know some people may be thinking, what does this have to do with forgiveness? Well, it can very much have a lot to do with forgiveness. It's a part of the cycle, like the question said. But first of all, sometimes we have this volatile, like corrosive anger, I think I called it in the sermon, when we're holding on to something that we haven't dealt with. And sometimes that is a need to either forgive someone else, a situation. Sometimes we're holding on to anger against God for some reason, and we feel like we need to forgive him. I mean, seriously, like it could go in a million different directions. And when that builds up, it explodes in different ways. It's always going to spill out in one way or another. It's a hole in our bucket, and it's going to come out. And for some, it comes out more forcefully than for others. And so I think it absolutely ties back to forgiveness in that regard. And then, like he mentioned, the cycle of then, he gets frustrated with himself and angry with himself, and then, has to forgive himself for the action. So I think, first of all, recognizing that this is actually an issue that I think it's great that you're aware of, and train yourself. And it can seem silly, but everything I was reading and things I've experienced in my life, and, just whatever, it talks about the idea of imagining a situation, a person, a comment, or whatever that is triggering for you. And I agree with Dan. Sometimes, like when we're feeling this anger, it's because we are fearing or we're feeling threatened. And maybe it could be like because of words, it could be because of actions, or just a feeling. And we have this need to protect either our thought process, our values, our moral code, or whatever, maybe even physically protect ourselves. And so I think it's important to try to identify some of those triggers, and then maybe walk yourself through, like, how can I respond before I get to that explosiveness? Because it may seem like it happens in a blink of an eye, but we know that there's a little bit of time there. And so there are techniques and processes that people go through to kind of try to calm themselves down. Dan mentioned some of those. But I think it's big enough and important enough to like pay attention to it and put time into going through different scenarios, when it's just you and your cup of coffee and just saying, this is something that usually like really ticks me off. And just imagine yourself like how you normally would react, and then imagine yourself like reacting differently, and call upon the power of Jesus. I know it can sound like not possible, but it is. It absolutely is. And then I think if you do have an outburst, hopefully there is not, if there is damage with others, you can clean that up. But then the damage with yourself, you've got to make sure that you sit before the Lord and clean that up.
Yeah.
Not a easy prescription though. And it's not something that's going to work for everyone in every situation all the time. But those are just some of the things that I have heard and learned myself to be helpful in situations.
Yeah, those are good thoughts. You know, I knew a guy, I actually met him through Greg and Paul, who used to do exorcisms.
Really?
And he would go and do like if someone people suspected that this person was demon possessed, he would go to them and he would do this exorcism type prayer session. And the first thing he would ask is there anybody in your life that you need to forgive that you haven't? And that was the first thing.
Wow.
And I think largely because of some of the stuff we're talking about here, where when you don't have forgiveness, that kind of bitterness fills our bucket. And you know, George Carlin has said he used to joke about how, you know, there are people walking around who are just on the verge of losing it, and like the smallest thing could tip, like they could get like a free sample size of toothpaste in the mail and they would just go crazy, you know, just like the smallest little thing would just drive them nuts for some reason. And that's because their bucket is already full of so much stuff that they haven't resolved yet. And so, and I think that there's something really right about that. You know, if you think about like, you know, God wants us to have this love relationship with each other and with him. And that means that we have to have this autonomy. We have to have this freedom to be able to do that. And we have to have, like, you know, the power to do what we want to do and live how we want to live. And when you think about that is, okay, I am freely choosing to love God. Well, there's a lot of things that can compete with that freedom. And if, let's say, I just lost my job because a coworker who doesn't like me lied to my boss, and I got fired, and I'm walking around with all that bitterness and anger. I'm just like, it's just, you get so subsumed, you get so contracted into yourself. You don't have that robust freedom and power and say so, because you're so small and you're just fixated on that. And forgiveness, when you release all of that stuff, that's where you get that autonomy back. And that's why it is a gift to yourself. And I think that's part of the reason why, if you are experiencing demon possession, this guy, the first thing he says, let's free you up, for sure. Let's free you up from whatever might be contracting you and taking your power away from you. And unforgiveness is the biggest one. And so I just think you're dead on.
That's good, Dan. It sounds like you're almost slipping into nugget time there. So
yeah, you know,
I hope you didn't give all your good stuff away.
Well, I just here's what all I want to do for my nugget is I want to read my meditation this week.
Yes, I love that.
Good.
It was so good. It was so good. Loved it.
Good.
So do you think we're ready? Are we ready to get there?
I think we are ready for nugget time.
Okay. I think we're ready. Fantastic. Do you want to end with your meditation? And
Sounds
so
good.
I'll go first and we'll end with your, okay, awesome. Gosh, I honestly hadn't thought of what my nugget will be, although I think I am at a slight advantage here. So I will just say, as a recap of what we've been talking about, I think forgiveness truly is a gift. And so for those of you, if you think of the 3 aspects of forgiveness that we talked about, for those of you who struggle primarily with the forgiveness that we receive from the Lord, and you feel unworthy, or like you're always messing up, or you just don't see him in that forgiving light, you assume he's like this, like Dan said, he's like ready to slap you at any moment. just know that that's not the truth. And that is part of the reason why I believe God said this when he was like revealing himself, this like monumental statement that he made about his character. He was like, and by the way, I forgive. I am forgiving. I lift the burden. And so that is for you. Now, it doesn't absolve you from responsibility, or it doesn't absolve you sometimes from consequences. Like that's a part of it all, but you are forgiven. So please accept that and receive that and live into that. And for those of you who struggle with forgiving others, there are many reasons why we fear what will happen when we say we forgive. And I would encourage you to examine that and just know that what forgiveness is not is just as important at what forgiveness is and why it matters for our lives. And it really can truly set you free, not just your physical self and all the benefits we talked about, but spiritually, it can truly set you free. It can lighten your load and your soul can be free to live and to be. And so I think that's valuable. And then for those of you who really struggle with forgiving yourselves, I think we need to accept the truth of who God says that we are and let that be our story instead of the story that we consistently tell ourselves. We're not good enough. We always mess up. You know, whatever it is for you. Like I shared about my mom guilt. Like I love my kids so much. And there is this huge fear of something I would say or do and the way I raised them would like forever damage them for life. And anytime I made a mistake, or I talked about, you know, us not having a great morning and me having to go back and apologize and then thinking, great, now they have to go to therapy because of that. You know, it's just this vicious cycle. And we are just living in our heads and we're just consumed, and like, let God lift that burden and set you free. And you need to forgive yourself. Yes, do the work. Yes, hold yourself accountable, but know that forgiveness is a gift that you can give to yourself as well. And I pray that we unwrap it, we embrace it, and we fully live into it, all aspects of forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no guilt like mom guilt. I've noticed.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, moms.
I know, it's rough. It's so rough.
Yeah, but and I also like the way that you put that we have to unwrap it, like, you know, because so often forgiveness talk is just religious talk, and but when you unwrap it, you have to kind of explore your own self and kind of really get in touch with what's going on in yourself. So, okay, so my meditation for this is called The Gift of God's Forgiveness, and it goes like this. Look at us, trying to become flowers in this frozen winter. Look at us, trying to become new creations in the same old world. We hear God's voice. He calls us to high places. But things, well, they take longer to fix than they do to break. And we are rising up from a great, great fall, reaching so high from places so low. And yet God knows our woe and our long, long road. And though he will not compromise his light with dark, and though he will not soften his high standard, he lifts us when we stumble, and he forgives us when we miss the mark.
Amen. Thank God for that.
Yes.
Oh, that was good, Dan. MuseCast high five, bud.
Woo-hoo. High five cam is on.
High five cam is on. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you're feeling like the Christmas spirit and you're into it and you are jiving along with us throughout this series. We will chat with you later on. And guess what? The Christmas series continues this weekend. We have more gifts to unwrap. And so please tune in and then circle back with us next Tuesday as we continue the conversation. Have a great week, everyone.
See you guys.